Hey everybody, Doug here from 2 Plus Tough. Happy Friday all around, and welcome to another While You're Reforging. If you don't know, and this is your first time, excuse me, this is my weekly live show where I hang out on Fridays about this time, usually between 10 and 11 my time here in the Seattle area, to catch folks over in the UK and Europe who I don't normally get to interact with a whole lot, just simply because of the time difference. And so I thought we could do a little show on Fridays, and that's exactly what this is. We're going to talk, hobby news, what's going on with my personal news, Games Workshop news, as well as a main topic, which this week, again, was picked by the patrons, and there's some great discussion to be had. So there's not going to be a lot of visual stuff for these shows. It's all audio, so go ahead and just grab some models, pull out your paints, and let's get started. So I see the chat's working. Hello, everybody. Patrick, Night is Zen. Hey, how you guys doing? Let me know if everything works and everything all right, and we're going to jump right into it. So let me pull up my little to-do list here. We always kick it off with hobby. Now, if we go down to the hobby desk, this time around, you will see that it's not nearly as bare as it was before. So, basically, I got a whole bunch of Beasts of Chaos, and on top of that, Jack from Rerolling Ones gave me a Varengard to paint, and I am excited about that. I'm making it match my Nurgle, so you can see a guy here for reference. We've got the dark blue armor, kind of a Drowned Men light theme, because I painted him before there was like an official scheme, so got that. He's got his demonic steed. He's still very much a work in progress, but the nice thing about this scheme is once you kind of block out the initial colors because of all like the trimming on the edges of the armor, once you kind of get that out, it goes really quickly. So I've already done what I think is the hardest part, or at least the most boring part. But I want to grab something else here. Give me just a second away from the camera. And boom. This is a great big box of Beasts of Chaos. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, Doug, it's not 2018 or 19. You didn't promise to use Beast this year. And the truth is, I had an idea for a tournament list, specifically just for tournaments, that uses the Pestilent Throng. And so I wanted to try it out. And so there's a local buddy named Matt who is awesome. He was looking at some of the extra Lumineth stuff that I got, and I was like, you know what? I just don't have it in me to start a whole new army. My heart's a little broken there, but yeah. So I started with this, and I am happy. So once I get Jack's Varengard done, I'm going to hop into the Beasts of Chaos, specifically building a Pestilent Throng. I mean, like I said, it's 4 tournaments. The idea is, well, I'll explain the idea in a second because it's part of games played, but having hordes and hordes of Bestigor and Ungor hop on objectives while an Affliction Cyst pins the enemy in place. So that's the core idea of it anyway. Regarding other hobby progress, though, that's about it for the progress. It took a while to get the right day to go out and prime everything and that kind of stuff, so that's how it is there. As far as other stuff, I always wrap in games played with this kind of scenario, or this section, I mean. And I did play a game. I hung out with Jack last Saturday. Yes, it was a Saturday. That is a day of the week. And we were going to play the aerial battles thing, but actually once we got there and opened the book, I left mine at work all week, so I didn't have a chance to like read ahead to make sure I understood the rules, and we just like from scratch just opened the book and got like 2 pages into it. We're like, man, this is a lot of rules to learn just for a pickup game, and I'm rusty on AOS, so we're like, you know what, we'll just cancel it. We'll just play a game of AOS, and we'll come back around to the aerial assault stuff later on, which I still want to do for sure. None of the models in that variant of the game I own, so like I don't have anything, so it's all up to Jack. Basically, we use one of his KO boats and like a Bloodthirster or something cool like that. So anyway, that was coming in the future. But I did play a game of AOS. We did, like I said, I kept leaving my GHB at work because I was using it for notes and that kind of stuff. I write notes on my lunch break and that kind of thing for shows. And I kept forgetting it, so I never got to the battle plans. And I did not know that now battle plans have changed to where certain types of units give you bonuses. Like if a battle line's holding this specific thing, it's better than a normal troop. Did not understand that. Well, I go to Jex. He has his corn, which he's using for their Ember Vault campaign, which you should absolutely go watch on their channel, Rerolling Ones. And against my Nurgle. And I was very rusty, I will admit. It was a good time. Basically, if you don't know how my list works, I take an Affliction Cyst, which you don't see very often. It's where the Puscoil Blight Lords, so it's 3 Puscoil Blight Lord units, one of them's a unit of 4, and there's 2 units of 2. I can, with the Lord of Afflictions, launch them very, very reliably. It's probably the most reliable alpha strike thing that I've personally played. I know that there's better. I know that there are. But between all the rerolls and the bonuses that he gives the battalion, that kind of stuff, they are glued, right? Turn 1. And I pinned down his Varangard and I don't know, just a lot of stuff. And we did the math, and he's like, he had 3 battle line units, but because of the way Nurgle's battle line if works, because I took an Affliction Cyst with the Lord of Afflictions as my general, all the Blight Lords are now battle line. And then I took a Blight Cyst, which is a bunch of Blight Kings, and in a Nurgle army, they're all battle line. And so I'm looking at the board, I'm like, okay, I have 2 heroes that are not battle line, and that's it. Everything else in the army, with the exception of now summoned Plague Bearers, apparently from an FAQ that we know, they don't count as battle line for the purposes of those bonuses. But the point is, there's a lot of beef on the table, and all of it could outdo him on objective. So, by turn 2, the score was 14-0, I believe. No, it was 14-4. That's what it was. And essentially, Jack saying that was practice. I know that wasn't. I know you were throwing softball at me, or at the very least, because I couldn't have handled anything tougher. So this isn't about me being a better player than you. Yeah. So absolutely, it was a great time to get back into the field of the army. Remind myself why I love Nurgle, to be honest with you. And honestly, the interesting thing was, so I really wanted to try that one specifically because it's a 2-drop list. It's the 2 battalions. And what I found interesting was, like, I really like that. I really like having the low battalion drop. It guarantees me, in most cases, the alpha strike kind of thing that I need for that list to work. The only thing that I didn't care for was because I took the Blight Cyst, which previously I could not fit, or I couldn't fit well, I suppose. Because I took the Blight Cyst, I had no wizards. Even though you can take 0-1 wizards in the Blight Cyst, which I think I might try later on. The fact that the reason I went with the Pestilent Throng is because I can have 2 Great Bray Shamans. And I want that. I want wizards, to even just have the ability to unbind something. The possibility is there. Also, they gain access to the turn the wheel thing for Nurgle, which is huge. If I throw Mystic Shield on one of my Puscoil Blight Lords units, they just get tougher. They're just a tough unit. So, I like them. I thought it was a good game. I had a wonderful time. Jack's always a gentleman and a scholar when it comes to gaming. And, yeah. So, that is it for my personal games played and hobby. So, between those 2 things, yeah, that was pretty much my entire week along with work. So, one last thing here I wanted to do sort of in the hobby section before we take a break and look at the chat, which please go ahead and throw in questions and that kind of stuff in the chat. Last week I had mentioned that patron Brian had put together a Path to Glory mix with Coalition of Death Rules, where it's like a symbiosis of multiplayer games and Path to Glory. Because if you don't know, like, the basic Path to Glory stuff is all like attacker defender. There's not really like a 3-person variant. And so in the description down below, I did put a link to his Google Drive. It's open for, my assumption is for everyone to take a look at. And it's just melding the two rule systems together, and it's not complicated, but it's one of those things, and I kind of said it in my Path to Glory video earlier this week, or maybe it was last week. All the tools for any kind of game that you want to play are there. Games Workshop has published them in some capacity, I bet. The thing is, though, they don't always connect the dots super well, and so this is a way that you can connect the dots between Coalition of Death and Path to Glory. So there you go. Looking at the chat, if I didn't respond to something you wanted me to respond to, please go ahead and say so. That's so sweet. So it just popped up on my end as the creator thing. So is it Rouse321? Thank you so much, he says, for making Fridays better. Well, that's hard to do. Fridays are pretty great. So thank you. That's a high compliment. Let's see. Question. Doug, I'm interested in becoming a patron. I've never subscribed to someone before. What's the deal, man? What's the deal? You just follow the Patreon link down below. I have a huge wall of text that explains how it all works in a video that makes it much more interesting and short. And basically, at the first of the month, whatever amount you sign up for will get debited from your account, and you have my eternal gratitude. And then I'm going to be interacting with patrons quite a bit here because I want to do a second lore contest here soon. So we're going to be kicking that off. I don't have a date yet. I need to organize exactly what I want the core of it to be. So yeah, that is how that works. Jack asks, do the Bray Shaman get access to Nurgle spells? They only get the basic wheel one where you can turn the wheel, but if I wanted to, I could find a way to squeeze in the Flaming Taurus Endless spell, because that's a piece of chaos spell and that they can take. So that's an interesting one. Jacob, Doug, have I come up with any hero characters from the Anvil of Apotheosis yet? Yes, I did, but we're going to do it together in a video this week because there's some cool content coming. I hope you're all excited for, where it's taking narrative blurbs in your battle tome. We're creating characters based on those blurbs that don't have war scrolls or anything like that. They're just a footnote character for a throwaway story, and talking about how we can recreate those things with battle plans and stuff like that. So I really like it. As far as Anvil of Apotheosis in general goes, I wholeheartedly concur with Vince Ventrella's statement. I was just watching his Warhammer Weekly yesterday morning at work, and the core idea is you can build a hero, and for some specific armies it's the greatest hero option that they have, right? And in terms of the magnitude of impact they have. But the vast majority of heroes you make, you're going to build it, it's going to be like 200 points in match play, and then you look at like other 200 point options you have, and you're like, oh, it's not that great. You know what I mean? And that's actually good. That is actually a very good thing, where the flavorful narrative thing can exist with some, understanding that there are broken ways to make him in terms of for very specific factions. And I'm really talking about the +1 to attack or whatever it is, whatever the commander thing is for the most part. But that on the whole, they seem reasonable. You know what I mean? If not reasonable in the sense of like, this is accurately costed. I'm not talking about that. I mean reasonable in the sense of if someone walks up to you and says, hey, do you mind if I use my custom hero? I really want to like flesh out this narrative. That there's nothing so egregious, you know what I mean, about the vast majority of builds that you can be like, oh sure, dude, yeah, do whatever. Just show me what rules he has so we're on the same page and I don't get gotcha'd. I like it. So that would definitely rank up there. Question, did you see the new Blood Bowl team? We're going to talk about that here in a second when we get to news, for sure. Also, new lore contest. Yes, I want to do a lore contest. Samuel, hey man, just wanted you to know your channel content is great. Oh, thank you so much. That's very, very kind of you. Let's see. Bestigors and Nurgle are quite strong. I've been debating taking some in my Blades of Corn. Nice. Yeah. So I'm confused about Overlords. Does certain units only appear in certain parts, different companies? That's a bit of an in-depth question for a faction I don't know a ton about, to be perfectly honest with you. I'll have to check that one later. Leave in the comments and we can review that afterwards. So let's go over to the news. shall we? So, here we are. We got our Games Workshop page. Now, I'm just going to level with you. I have largely tuned out the Warhammer community page, not because it's not about quality, it's just, it's the launch of the next edition of 40K, their moneymaker, at a time when launching products is difficult. And so, yeah. Oh, hold on here a second. Question, what's the lore contest? I did one before. You can go watch the video on that. I'm not ready to disclose any details about the next one, because it's still a thing that I'm thinking about. So anyway, back to the news. So I kind of tuned it out, but a few articles really did catch my eye as I was reviewing what came out this last week. And so I actually have those just pulled up here separately. So the big one, rather than talking about all the bajillion 40K articles they've put out, and they have put out a bajillion, one thing I did want to focus on was the fact that they have these new starter sets. Now, if you don't know, the Indomitus box released, and it was an extreme amount of money, and they sold out dang near instantly, and Games Workshop was like, hey, if you want, we'll print you one just for you, yo. And people were like, yay, good guy GW. But the thing is, well, they are a good guy. That it's a cool thing to do, right? I mean, I get it. But the reason I felt no temptation towards getting the Indominus box is because it was very clear that this isn't the starter set, right? It's not Dark Imperium. It's something different. It's like a special edition type thing. It is to Dark Imperium what like the Lumineth box is to the faction of Lumineth, right? This is just the special tasting, and then you can just go buy everything else like everyone else. So yeah, it's interesting. So we're kind of moving around here. Yeah, and it just kind of goes through. They have the different tiers. There's some cool maps. I like all this stuff. And I just want to kind of show off the different like levels they give you for buying into the game. And again, I think this is a far more interesting, article than just talking about Indomitus, right? Because at this point, this is what we're talking about looking at for the next couple years for getting people into the game, is probably this one, the Elite set, I would imagine, where you have multiple units. Actually, there probably is one more big one, right? That'll probably be the big reveal ski. There we go, Command Edition. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah, the Command Edition, where it's like, it's very, very comparable to the last starter box. So that's cool, not a big deal to me. But we'll move right along. If you had any interest in Indomitus, it's a good way to get into it. So, one thing that I'm kind of tangentially interested in is Blood Bowl. And then the reason I say I'm tangentially interested in it is because, like, it's something familiar, American football, and something just that exists for pure fun. Now, fun is a interesting thing, and humor are interesting things when it comes to GW. They have a weird relationship with it where, like, there are clearly things that I believe Games Workshop meant to be funny that people take as way too serious. For example, I think a lot of 40K is very, very dark, like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy level of humor, but people take it as like, no, but we want it to be tough and serious and cool and masculine and have 20 cc's of testosterone injected into it. But Blood Bowl is one of those things where it's like, nobody is even trying to remotely act like this is serious. Like, I mean, within the universe, is what I'm saying. Like, it's a ridiculous setup, and it's executed perfectly. The only reason I've ever had trouble with Blood Bowl is because the rules, when you're playing it as a video game form, I really like Blood Bowl. It's a very engaging game, lots of fun. The problem I have with it as a tabletop game, there's so many special rules and re-rolls and that kind of stuff, and the computer calculating all of that for you or having quick reference things to just click on. So it just works better for me personally in a digital format. I had no interest in playing it in real life, like in a physical way. But they're saying they're doing a new edition of Blood Bowl, re-kicking it off, and I don't know. Let's see, Jack. Can I enter an upcoming contest even though we are BFFs? Rolling Ones is a subsidiary of 2+ stuff. Yes, you can. Wholly owned subsidiary of 2 Plus Tough Corp. Tough Corp, eat fresh. All right, so here we go. So I don't know what's on the docket for the future of Blood Bowl, but I will say I will absolutely jump in like a cannonball if they get the rules for playing in person. If they just cut a lot of the fat. I mean, I don't know any other way to say it. Just cut a lot of the fat. I don't need to roll 6 dice to determine if this guy moves 1 square to the left, which, you know, because in Blood Bowl you can reroll rerolls if you have mechanisms to do so. And so when you get enough rules stacked on top of each other, it just becomes a pain in the butt. So anyway, we're moving on beyond that. This is the different starter sets throughout the ages. Looking pretty cool. And then they showed this picture of the next one. And I just want to point out, looks amazing. I have less to say. Here, let me turn the volume off on that. I have very little to say. Oh my gosh, where's the flipping picture? About the actual game of Blood Bowl. And more about... I'm going to switch this song. This is a little intense. And switch the song. I have less to say about Blood Bowl and more to say about the idea of when people scoffed at AOS launching, they were like, we miss traditional fantasy. We miss the old stuff. There was like this weird attachment to like early European, that kind of thing. But then I look at some of the models that they have previewed for this. And I just got to say, the old world could have been so much more interesting. And now at the company, they are far more willing to do out there stuff. Like I love the armor. I love the exaggerated use of feathers and color and posing. Like all these things are so much better than ever existed in fantasy battles when it comes to like how we depict Tolkien-esque things. I don't know. For all the people who are like, fantasy battles, they killed it and it should have just stayed the way it was. Nah. No, they needed to at least do something to give some life to that aesthetic. You know what I mean? Like as a design team. And I think they nailed it. So we're going to talk, there's 2 more Blood Bowl articles here I want to show off, and then we'll stop and chat with the comment section, so you guys don't feel ignored. But here we have some orcs. And these are amazing looking. So let's see. We got this guy. One thing I've always loved about GW orcs, I love the consistent use of this giant, big, like exaggerated metal jaw at the bottom. Really, really love it. Andrew says, I really hate how we are getting Blood Bowl things we hadn't seen before instead of the stuff we were previewed back at Adepticon from home. You know what? Here's the theme for 2020, flexibility. And so if they already had this stuff on the printing press and it was ready to go, I'm going to take what I can get for 2020. So I'm going to say I'm happy. I don't care about what they previewed. Not a single company on this planet has previewed something this year and had it go well or according to plan. Oh, man. All right, and then we got some... So it's a green skin article. So here we have some grots, and these ones are so much fun. I remember when I was painting grots for my orc army in 40K, and I remember thinking these sculpts, they just don't... They hold up. They do. I just want more of them. You know what I mean? I want more diversity, that kind of stuff, and poses and that kind of thing. I would love to see what people can do with these guys as far as like putting pistols in their hands and that kind of stuff. Very cool. Here we have what I'm assuming is like a legendary star player. This guy is the coolest orc boss ever. Like, honestly, I don't know how big he's going to be. I assume that's a 32 mil, but man, I like him. And here is this is a fun picture. So this is the big blow up of all of the new grots and that kind of stuff. We saw some of them. But here we have some, like, their form of the pump wagon without the pump, I suppose, is what it is. I just like it. They're just so fun. I've heard they are the worst team to play, but they're just a lot of fun. So yeah. And lastly, for their new teams, we have the Undead. And these ones, I think we're going to see a lot of conversions. Like, orcs always get conversions, but other factions not as much. But these guys, look at that hooded head. Oh man, that's good looking. I like it. This guy, yep, full zombie. I dig it. I dig it. This guy, oh, look at that. It's almost in Seahawks colors. Jack, check it out, buddy. You played your army enough for GW, you'd be like, you know what? That is a winning team. Okay. WYR Grot's so cute. Yeah, they're good. I like this guy with the pumpkin on his head. Oh, that's a killer head. Oh, man. And even the arm plates look like little coffins. These guys outdid themselves. We're going to move on from this because I'll get lost. Here we have some, what I'm going to say are spirit hosts, but they're drying socks on them like a clothesline, and I think that that is what America needs right now. That's amazing. Yep, got some socks drying. Here's a big zombie boy. I'm looking for anything unique. Okay, we got some werewolves. I dig it. I dig it. No idea what I'm using for, but the undead team's amazing. Absolutely, yeah. These are all incredible models, and like I was saying before, I don't have right now any deep love of Blood Bowl, but what I'm looking at here is like the old world needed to change because they're doing so many more cool things now in that style that I don't know. I love them. They look fantastic. I also love the Nurgle team. I still want to get them to do some conversions. And they're just such cool models. I don't know why I just keep staring at this guy's like Oogie Boogie Man from Nightmare Before Christmas face, and I'm just like, I love it. All right, so I'm going to pause here and look at the chat. If you have comments or questions for me based on the news this week, I know this is probably going to be a light section because AOS didn't get a lot of love this last week, or really much acknowledgement at all, and that's okay. It happens, you know. Everyone gets their turn in the sun. Go ahead and leave in the chat below, and I'm going to prep us for our next segment, but our main topic for the day. I'm just going to throw this piece of artwork up there so I can ramble without having to focus on what's on the screen. And I'll just give it a pause here just in case anybody has any last second things they want to chat about. So let me pull up my notes to do our little discussion. All right. I think we're good. So today's question comes from a patron, the topic I should say, comes from a patron, and the suggestion, as you may have seen the title, is advice on what mostly unspoken rules and procedures are in place to play Age of Sigmar would be very helpful. David Wright asked the question, what's the first Lumineth unit you're going to look at in September? None of them, probably. I'm really in love with my Nurgle right now. Question, what would you like to see in the next AOS starter set? Ooh. AOS starter set. I would like it. So right now our thing, we have Night Haunt and Stormcast. We're still on that one. I would love to see a Destruction faction. I want some new kind of orc, specifically orc. I think orc, not grot, because it's too hoardy. I want orcs, and I want, honestly, I would kill for an Orcs and Cities of Sigmar box where it's like all new sculpts that do the same kind of awesome old world reinvented with fantasy extreme versions that we saw when we were talking about the Blood Bowl team. I would love that. That would be my ideal, to be honest with you. All right, so moving into our main topic, as far as unspoken rules in AOS, okay? And so Biofoot78, this goes out to you, my friend. So I began to really think about this because this was a hard one, and I was comparing games that I play personally, casually, and events that I've been to. And honestly, my trip to Nova for this specific topic was extremely enlightening because that was an event where you can say, yes, I understand that if I go play with a different gaming group, maybe they have different unspoken rules or isms or whatever. But it's different when you go to a convention and just the sheer quantity of other gaming experiences, views, and groups that you're interacting with super wild. So I learned a lot for that one. And as it turns out, there's a lot of things I assume leaving them unspoken in this hobby. And so let's crack into some of those today. And keep in mind, with all of these, I cannot stress this enough, accidents happen, miscommunications happen. This isn't meant to be judgy. So if I say something that's unspoken and you're like, oh man, I do that, it's not a judgy thing, right? It's just a suggestion for like, what are some things that we take for granted that if you went to go meet somebody else, they might not. And so it's just about, like all things in this hobby, like I've said before, working with one another, collaborating to have a fun gaming experience. That's what we're talking about. So I want to make that very clear. Nothing here is judgy. I start with the ones that I came up with, and then throughout this segment, feel free to throw things in the chat here towards the end, and I'll specifically say like, hey guys, throw stuff in the chat, unspoken things that you guys do. And we'll tack those on the list so Biofoot has a really good understanding of what kind of the hobby is, unspoken things within the hobby. All right, get a good sense of that. All right, so initial things that I expect unspokenly. You come prepared with all your models and books, etc. Right? And the reason I say this is specifically, the game takes so long to play anyways. If you get to a store and you meet up, or a night at the club, whatever, waiting another 30 minutes to find your stuff in your books is annoying. Like, truly annoying. The core idea behind this is you just need to value your and your opponent's time. Show up ready to go. If you can, show up early to get the table all set up, and you can bang out games pretty quickly. Like when you're playing at an event, games take like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and that's awesome because everything is all set up for you. You just show up, put your junk down, and you start playing. And I like that. I like that quite a bit. And that what that says to me is someone values my time and their own, and they want to have a good experience with me. Now, the next one is going to be a bit tricky, okay? And again, this is why I put the note up front about judginess, so bear with me here. I said, I'm going to change this song. I don't know what's going on with this playlist today. It's being all weird. The next one is understanding the rules of your army. Now, like I said, this one can come off as being very judgy. And I'm going to talk later on about my experience where I was playing against someone at an event that didn't know their army. When I say understand your army, I just mean little things like within versus wholly within, or how your allegiance abilities work, because some of them are very, very specific. And so just having a good grasp of what your faction does, I don't care if you've taken this army to many events, I don't care if it's the first time you've played it, I don't care if you're new, like let's just walk through stuff, because after like the third time of, oh wait, I forgot this, it gets really, not frustrating, but taxing, right? Because now you're constantly going back. It's like a record that's skipping. And I don't know, not a big fan of that one. But I can understand that someone would perceive that as like, oh, this player who's comfortable in the game doesn't have patience for me as a new player. That's not what I'm talking about. I just mean that you pay attention to details, you ask questions when you need answers, and you just overall communicate intent very well, and you do your best. You know what I mean? Maybe you'll look at your battle tome as much as you can, or you got the Age of Sigmar app to just try and memorize a few details about movement and stuff like that. Yeah, and so I don't know. That's just one that, that's a courtesy, I guess, is probably a better way to put that. Next one I have is when you roll, pause to let your opponent see the dice. Always pull out the misses. Okay, so let's say I roll 6 dice. I'm gonna like wait a beat, let them see, or maybe I'll look at my opponent to make sure they're looking down at the dice, and then I'm gonna pull away the misses. If there's any dice, sorry Jack, shenanigans, basically like, re-roll 1s or 6s, or all those kinds of things that we can do. Be sure to articulate that using your big boy words, for lack of a better term, using your mouth to articulate what you're doing before you're doing them. This way it just doesn't look like you're just chucking dice and re-rolling them without any kind of whim. You know what I mean? Like, you just got to articulate what you're doing to your opponent. And then I have never had a problem where someone thought I was actively cheating. There's been issues where like someone was using the clear Idnith Deepkin dice that were just impossible to read from across the table. Like, I just don't like GW faction-specific dice. I think they just don't nail it ever. But I understand why players want to use them, and so being articulate and saying, this is what I rolled, I'm pulling away the misses, I get reroll ones, that kind of stuff goes a long way to eliminating a myriad of problems when it comes to you and your opponent agreeing on stuff. So here's my next one. This is a big one, okay? I cannot stress this enough. When I go to an event, whether that's a weekend event, that's like a 3-game thing, or at a big event, like I went to Nova, the unspoken reality that we have all agreed to when we show up to this event is that the tournament organizer for that day or days is God, okay? Like, if you have a debate with your opponent on rules, no matter how friendly the tone is, right? I mean, it's easy to assume like aggression and people arguing because that's kind of like the stigma about calling a TO over at an event. But the truth is, sometimes there's rules where two completely reasonable people who both assume the best of their opponent can look at a situation and be like, I do not understand how these things interact. So you call a TO over, which you should. And whatever the TO decides is the new reality, right? Like, when the TO decides an answer, it is what it is. As long as they are consistent with that ruling, there is no arguments. It's done. When they say dice down, you put your dice down, that kind of thing. And alongside that, what we're going to call like an asterisk point glued on, is that you need to get the dang TO if you disagree, right? The tournament organizer is not a principal at a school or like a police officer at an event, or like they kind of just stand off to the side. Like if you've ever been to like the circus or something like that, there's always cops there because of the number of people involved and just to make sure everyone's safe. They are more like a party planner who wants to make sure that everyone's having a good time. Right? And like the people who coordinate big dinner parties, they're walking around making sure the games are going smoothly, there's no tension between players, and that everyone's having fun. That is the perfect tournament organizer. Now, I will admit that looks different based on the scale of the event. Like my little local one-dayers, I can walk up to the TO, shake hands, how you doing, man? You going good? He'll come in and walk up almost like a server at Olive Garden. Hey, you guys good? You guys good? Can I get you some breadsticks? Something like that. And then he walks away. But at Nova, the guys who were running those major events, and I will admit, I didn't, because the event I was actually in took all of my attention. I didn't get to interact a lot with like Chuck Moore and the other members of the team who were trying to like run the actual event. But I did go check out the 40K ones and 30K, and some of their narrative events for AOS, that kind of stuff. And the truth is, like, there's just so many people going on. They don't really have the time to be that kind of friendly, but they are there to facilitate other people having fun. So if there's a problem, it's not some bad thing to go get the TO. Just remember that. That's the core I'm getting at, right? There's no shame in getting a TO, but the point is the same. Another unspoken thing, when you show up to an event, you have read the player's packet. This does not just mean the schedule, but the missions, meaning the battle plans, the realms you're taking, notable rules and exceptions as far as like Forge World units, or we're using the GHB 2020 version of this same mission because they keep using the same mission names and sometimes people can't keep up. That kind of stuff. Transitioning away from tournament and event and more match play stuff, I want to talk about casual, right? What are some casual things? Biofoot, you asked a question, and again, I have no context for it, like if you go to events, if you're just getting into the hobby and that kind of stuff. But a casual game is more often than not what you'll be experiencing. And so for a casual or narrative open games, all of which can still use matched play elements, like we do, my buddies and I, the Rerolling Ones, they do a great job. Narrative themed stuff, still use matched play for army building. That's it. Communication between players becomes infinitely more important in a casual environment because you need to decide what kind of gaming experience the two of you want to have, whereas in an event, the tournament organizer has that discussion for you. we're here to play this kind of game. We're going to play this battle plan, this realm, because we're not telling a story. We are playing symmetrical battle plans to determine skill sets and army building prowess, right? Like that's what an event is, like a tournament for winning. Events for narrative or even just casual stuff on your game night, there's a lot more collaboration between you and your opponent trying to decide what you want to have. And that can look like a lot of different things. Some of them look very, very similar to tournament stuff, but this is what I mean. So like you gotta open yourself up to different experiences anytime you're willing to work with other people. So what I often suggest to folks is you do the I scratch my back, you scratch, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of thing, where, you know, let's say you are someone who's, I want to play narrative, I want to play very casual, maybe even, an open play mission generator thing, that kind of stuff. And most of your gaming group really likes the tournament match play stuff. You just approach the group and say, listen, this is what I enjoy about the hobby. Would you mind if we play a game of match play hardcore, stuff? Can we play like a goofier narrative thing afterwards or with my next opponent or something like that? And so just collaborating, you extend an offer for their fun and you invite them to extend the same offer back at you. Again, collaboration and people skills make this hobby amazing. And so developing those, this is the perfect way to develop those kinds of things. Expressing your needs and your desires and working with other people to come up with solutions is a wonderful skill. It's the best part of this hobby. Other examples that I wanted to kind of point out that you'll definitely run into at your local gaming group. If the group is preparing to go to an event, they're in a different mindset. Even though they might meet up casually, like, oh yeah, it's technically just Warhammer Wednesdays at the game store. But if everyone's like prepping for an event, they're not there for Warhammer Wednesdays. They're there to like curb stomp and dick punch and all this kinds of stuff because they're getting ready for an event, even though it's not the actual thing. And so expressing that to your opponent of just saying like, hey, listen, like, are you getting ready for that event this coming weekend? Okay. We'll do one like that for sure. Would you mind playing something fun afterwards with me? Yes, cool, done, boom. As for other tiny things that are unspoken that I could come up with, free and honest information with your opponent. If you're, I'm trying to think exactly how I want to word this because I want to express a very specific thing. If your opponent asks you a question, how far can that unit move? Okay, let's pick Bestigors, okay? We're going to pick the Bestigors in my Nurgle army. How fast can that unit move? Is a question where people who no one likes would answer 6 inches. Why? Because 6 inches is on their war scroll. I think it's 6, maybe it's 8, I don't know. But you know what I mean? Like their movement value. But neglect to say, oh yeah, and the banner lets me run and charge. The musical instrument gives me +1 to run, +1 to charge, or +1 to charges, +1 to like pile in or something like that. The Great Unclean One in this list gives him 3 inches of movement with his bell. He's next to a Grey Bray Shaman, which is another 3 inches. And all of a sudden you're stacking all these things up. And it's not a 6-inch move. His threat range is not 6.5 inches, right? His threat range is the entire table. So like, try, if someone asks you a question about your units, do not just reference what they literally do on their war scroll in isolation, but reference what the army does with that thing, right? And I don't know how else to articulate that. What the army does with Bestigor when they're fully buffed is wildly different than what the army does if it was nothing but Bestigor in a vacuum in space, just doing nothing by itself. Just being a goat guy with no support is a sad Bestigor. And so just kind of keep that in mind. When someone asks you for information, you should be telling them everything, because the most fun games are when we make educated decisions. If I walk up to an event, which I do want to do with my Nurgle, and someone asks, what does your Nurgle army do? It's at turn 1, it's going to be up your nose, and then the rest of the game is you trying to pry me off of objectives. That is a thesis statement of my army. It is all it does. It doesn't kill much. It's just kind of there. But you know what I mean? Like, you have to set that realistically, because if they look at it like, oh, your Puscoil Blightlords only move 8 inches, that would be a dick move for me to say that, that they only move 8. So, yeah. OKSDM, give them the full tactical answer. That's a good way of saying it, for sure. The only reason I didn't bring up the word tactical is because that can mean a few things to different people, you know, because then you get into some folks who are like, well, if I use them this way, and they kind of present scenarios instead of saying, no, the worst case scenario I can give you is I can do X, right? Like I can go 48 inches across the table, and I can. It's nuts. So let's see. Next one I had, having reference material handy for them. So just having, you know, if you're going to an event and you know your army like the back of your hand, maybe you have the unit cards, just have your battle tome in some place that's easy to reach so that they have a question about the way an artifact or an allegiance ability works. You can quick reference it. And so I'm going to close this with what I think is the most important rule, right? And it should not be unspoken, but it is. And that is, this is just for me personally, always assume good in the other person. Always assume it's an accident, it wasn't cheating. And I'll give you an example, okay? So my first event that I went to, and I did a video on it, that has made me feel very awkward about my local community, but basically it did not go well. My first event, round 1, I was playing against a Legions of Nagash player. Now I'm looking at this list of suggestions that I've made thus far, and this player did not meet a large number of them, and he's in my local scene. I mean, the local scene here is Seattle, Tacoma, basically, and there's some outlying regions that kind of around the edges, but for the most part it's those. He didn't have his reference material handy. He didn't know the difference between Within and Wholly Within when it came to the resummoning of Legions of Nagash units. He was not communicating things when he was, you know, what are you rolling this die for? You know what I mean? Like, you just kind of start chucking dice and not telling me what's going on. You're all in your head. We were having rules disagreements, and they were friendly, but he was hesitant to get the TO. He seemed almost like he didn't want to be in trouble, kind of a thing. But here's the issue is, after that game I was very frustrated because it just felt like everything went wrong. Okay, and I know for a fact, I'm going to put this out there as clear as possible, I messed up too, because I was bringing my orc army, and it was one of the first times I had played them, and I didn't spend a lot of time practicing, so I was referencing things a lot. I cannot emphasize that enough. This was both of us. It was also a mission where it was in Guyran back when we had Realmscape features where you couldn't run unless you could fly, and it was just like, this is the worst mission that's ever been made. Against the most grindy opponent before War Clans, and it was just like, oh, this sucks. It was just a bad experience. But what I realized after that, upon reflection and thinking about this question in terms of unspoken rules and spoken rules and that kind of stuff, and how we view other players, it's like, no. I had a bad game, but I didn't have a bad time. He was a good person. He was just there for the same reasons that I was. For him, he was far more casual than I am. Like, he just liked building and painting models, and this whole game thing was kind of new to him. Whereas, you know, from day one, I've been interested in the game as well. If nothing else, just to play and tell stories. So he was not the, like, you know, instigator of my bad experience. He wasn't a win-at-all-cost player. He was just a guy. He was very casual, and he was just very scattered. And because of the mission and the way the rest of the day went and that kind of stuff, it just really compounded that frustration. And upon reflecting, like, when this question came in, I was like, oh my god, that's like super deep, because I'm deconstructing all these very specific things that no one communicated to him that he needed to have for his first tournament experience. And, you know, because I had been to an event before that, and I had been to events for other games, I mean, like X-Wing and War Machine and Hordes, like stuff that's pretty, you know, pretty relative. I mean, like, in terms of, it's not a foreign thing going to a miniatures gaming event for me, but for him it really was. And seeing all those things that are unspoken, it created a negative play experience, but not a negative experience with another person. And distinguishing those two things is super important, because the people who go to these weekend events, honestly, unless they have some social problems, meaning that they just literally struggle to socialize with other people and articulate needs and understand, cultural things as far as like saying, excuse me, that kind of stuff. Most folks are there just to have fun. You know what I mean? And they have varying levels of knowledge of their army and passions and interests, but they're there to have fun. How can we work together to have fun? And honestly, once that game ended, me and him, we got along like gangbusters. We were just having a great time chatting. I was like, I love your paint scheme. This is awesome. He's like, oh, I love your orcs. We were chatting a whole bunch about it, talking about how he didn't like the mission because of the Realmscape feature. So it was a good day. He was a good person, but you got to keep that in perspective. And I want to emphasize that when you go to events and you have games that are in rapid fire succession back to back, it's easy to not give your brain time in between those games to stop and go, that guy was cool. That game sucked. That was no fun. That was probably the least fun game of whatever I've had. But you know what? That guy was cool. You know what I mean? Like you had that time to separate the experience from the person. And I don't know. I just thought that was a really interesting one. So whenever you see something happening on the table, always ask, right? If you see something kind of fishy as far as like dice and rerolls and that kind of thing, do not hesitate to ask, but always assume that it's, that they're not trying to cheat you. And if it becomes very apparent that they are, call the TO over because they need to go home. The TO over needs to send them home or whatever. So that's what it is. But honestly, those are my big ones. So I'm gonna go check out here. Pull up the chat. If you have any unspoken rules, go ahead and throw it in there. And I already see one great one by Andrew and Kenzie. Unless it's fantasy, politics, or religion, keep in real life stuff out. Absolutely, yes. Yeah. I would say. The only caveat I'll add to that is it is a little different if you are personal friends plus your Age of Sigmar group, but if you're just going to game night, don't bring up politics, don't bring up religion, or anything like that. I'm just going to throw this one out there because it's topical. Don't stand there like a Karen arguing about how inconvenient it is to wear a mask. Nobody cares. Literally no one cares. It's all we see on the news. Just play the game and have fun. Let's see, what else? I'm looking for other ones. Go ahead and throw your unspoken rules in there. One thing I did want to end here, and I don't know why I just thought of this. Some models are very awkwardly shaped, okay? And so an unspoken rule is you need to articulate with your opponent where the model actually is on the board. Communication is everything. So I'll give you a very practical example. I love my Puscoil Blightlords. They're the big fat flies that have mortal riders in the Nurgle army. They're super gross. I love them. The only problem with the physical model itself is that the wings come out very, very wide, and there's very little posability with them. I mean, you can have them go like up and down, but not like, to the back as if they're like plunging in quite as much. And so continuously, when I am playing this game, I have to say, and I do this with Jack, and I do it with all the opponents, like, hey, listen, this guy can't move there, but we can agree by looking at his base, he can clearly move into with 1 inch of a person. Do you mind? You know what I mean? And that level of communication and putting out intent is really important when you're talking about base size. If you're piling in, say, I intend to pile in here, but my intent is to stay 3 inches out of this other unit because I don't want to drag anyone else into combat. And you guys can work together to make that happen. Because of the nature of this hobby, where they have, I don't know, man, I swear Games Workshop has people designing models that forget that they're actually part of a game and that you need to transport them and like use them for stuff, not just like be on a shelf. That kind of gets lost. And so just simply articulating what you're trying to do as you're doing it in terms of distances and measurements and that kind of stuff goes a significant way. So just kind of keep that. That's my last one here. Let's see. Mordian says basic rules of personal hygiene: take showers, wear fresh clothes. Yep. 100%. 100%. And honestly, On that note, when I went to Nova, I was expecting something far worse. If I'm gonna be super cynical and just kind of just throw it out there, what I mean is, like I was expecting a lot of terrible BO and that kind of stuff. The bathroom situation was rough, but that had more to do on the hotel not understanding how often they needed to like send someone in to clean it, with that sheer many of people. But I only saw like 9 or 10 people between the AOS floor and the 40K one, where I was like, that dude simply does not understand human. He doesn't know how to human. Needs a shower, needs clothes. There was a dude wearing a bathrobe, like the entire, like this really gross, nasty white bathrobe the entire time at the 40K tables. And I was just like, that's not cool. But honestly, I was super impressed, because it turns out most of the people in this hobby are very reasonable adults who just want to have a good time and hang out and roll dice. So yes, it is true with the take showers, wear fresh clothes thing. I also feel like the people who aren't doing that rule don't understand, and you can't explain it to them. Those 8 people will never understand why they need to take a shower and why they need to change dang clothes. Let's see. What else is there? See, I've one thing I've seen come up multiple times in the chat, if you haven't been watching, was don't be a dick. Okay, that's like the famous rule, don't be a dick. The problem is with leaving things that way, and just that being the golden rule, is that people have different perceptions of what that means. So for me, being a dick could mean you're very quiet, you don't want to interact, you completely disregard the communication and interactivity of the game, which is kind of, to me, the foundational principle of this hobby, is just the ability to interact with other people and that kind of stuff. You seem trite when you do significantly well. You seem emotionless when you delete, half my army. I kind of expect even just like, oh man, that's nuts, stuff like that. There's no emotion. The thing is, though, what I just described to you is the exact way that my extremely good friend Jack Ballard plays at events with his shootcast, where it's just this very intense. He'll laugh and he'll have fun between rounds, that kind of stuff, but when he's in kill mode, he is in kill mode. You know what I mean? And so, like, but I know he's not a dick. He's a great player and he's a cool person. And so that's what I mean when I say, like, don't be a dick, is just, it's not a good sum up of all the unspoken rules, because of what that means for different people. Whereas my ideal way to play is the way that we played on Saturday, where there wasn't an event and he brought a goofy army against my goofy army, and we laughed a lot when Scarbrand did 32 mortal wounds and deleted a 10-man Blight King unit, because it was amazing. Let's see. Zozis. One, not for tournaments, but more for friendly games. Don't wander around or offer unsolicited tactical advice. That's a great one. What I like to do with, I'll be honest with you, I don't have a lot of situations where I am in a knowledgeable position to offer tactical advice to someone. Like, unless I'm doing like a demo, or I'm teaching, a person that I know is new. And the only thing that I will do, and I do think it's within the spirit of what Zozi said, is if they just stand there staring at the table for like a solid 4 minutes, I will very politely, as much as I can, lean over and say, so can I ask what you're thinking about? Can I help in any way? Do you have any questions about my units or about the best way to go? You have to ask them. Don't just tell them or assume or whatever. Yeah. I'm definitely a lot less boisterous and animated when I'm playing with something on the line. Absolutely. And that's the way a lot of us are. Like, for me, personally, for the folks who have played against me at Nova, even if I was just chipping in with the narrative event and that kind of stuff, I can get very serious looking until I realize that no matter what I do, I'm going to lose. And then all of everything that I have on the line just melts away. And I'm like, well, if I'm going to lose anyway, I'm sure as hell going to put Archeon the Everchosen into your general, because I'm going to lose with Archeon kicking your dude in the face, right? I mean, like, you just start having fun with it. You just do wacky stuff. So the minute that relieve valve pops, and I'm like, I'm kind of hosed, I just start having fun, but I can definitely see someone looking at that and be like, wow, this Doug from 2 Plus Tough, he's kind of a dick. You know what I mean? I can see it. I can see it. Mainly because I'm paranoid and too self-aware, to a fault, like a anxiety, social anxiety kind of thing, but it's there. Yeah, let's see. That is about all the big ones that I personally had, and I see that the chat really, I mean, with a lot of these that I'm seeing, a lot of it is just communicating intent and being there for a friendly experience. And I feel like friendly and respectful experiences are the ones where you don't just assume things, you don't just tell people what to do, but you ask questions and you listen and respond in real time. You give honest answers, that kind of stuff. And I do think it would be a good idea to have an episode talking about the TO's specifically role in stuff, because I have not been to a ton of events. I have not, but I have coordinated events for X-Wing. I did one for War Machine and Hordes. I actually played that quite a bit back in Iowa. And that kind of stuff, where it's like the core idea is to facilitate fun. That's it. You know what I mean? And people are so afraid of the TO or getting in trouble and that kind of stuff. It's like, nah, don't worry about it. Don't make someone else feel bad for winning. Oh yeah, that should never be a thing. Yeah. One thing that I think I can add here, and I know Jack has said it multiple times, that I love, and that is celebrate your opponent's dice rolls as much as you do your own. Meaning, when Scarbrand came in and did 32 mortal wounds, you had better believe there was some exciting profanity uttered on both sides of the table as we were both blown away by how freaking cool that was. You know what I mean? So I celebrated that, even though it was to the detriment of me. My unit got wiped away. But yeah, so, and that's one thing where if you do have that tournament mode, like Jack gets into, where he's very like almost expressionless, he's just kind of staring at the table, kind of calculating in his brain what's going on. He doesn't gloat over his good rolls and then scoff at your good ones, right? It's consistent, and consistency is incredibly important. When it comes to those kinds of things. So yeah, celebrate their stuff as much as your own. Don't make anyone feel bad for doing well. You shouldn't. Another thing that's kind of, it's not tangential to it, but it is kind of on the same thing, is remember, if you go to an event, you might be there for a totally different reason than someone else. So like, if round 1 of my 3-round event, I get paired with someone who their intent is to win the tournament, we are going to have very different play styles, right? Like, I'm going to be serious until I think that I can't win, and then I'm just going to have fun. They are going to be serious 100% of the time because they don't want a minor victory. They want a major victory, and they want ancillary objectives, whatever the crap we're using. So their foot's not coming off the gas pedal, and you just need to be okay with that. There's no way around it. You just need to be cool with someone wanting something different than you. And at the end of the game, I was going to say shake their hand, but in a COVID world, we can't do that anymore. But you know what I mean? Just be there to celebrate their victory. Hey, how could I have won? What do you think happened? You did great here. I didn't see this coming. Be a cheerleader when someone wins, for sure. MB, I've been out of AOS for some months. Now I got sucked into 40K. It's nice to hear your voice again. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. But anyway, friends, that is all that I had for today's topic as far as unstated things. I know it was a lot. I've been talking for quite a while. Again, to sum it all up, you just have to articulate your intentions to your opponent and assume the best of them and come prepared. Like, honestly, if you do those 3 things, you will always have a good time. If your opponent does those same 3 things, you'll always have a good time. You're ready to roll with a good buddy, or at least someone that you assume the best in, and you're going to try to communicate to your best to have the best experience possible. There's nothing else to it. And yeah, and that's all that I got. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here as this week's topic comes to a close. Let me see what we got for next week. I always like to do these little spoilers here. John B. asked, what about discussing how successful lore-wise the alternate takes on classic Tolkien races has been? So we're going to be talking about Fire Slayers and Kharadron Overlords compared to Tolkien-esque dwarves, Deepkin Realm Lords and Daughters of Cain compared to elves, and so on. So that's going to be next week's topic. I hope to have some cool info for you. Maybe not like, factual info, because a lot of it's aesthetic choice. That's just very personal opinion stuff, but stuff nonetheless to talk about. And I hope that you will join me next Friday for that. And I will try to get a live stream up with some painting sometime this week, but we'll have to see what work looks like. So thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope that you are all having a wonderful week and hanging in there throughout this summer. And, take care of yourself, be cool with other people, and always assume the best in each other. We got to get through this together. So thank you all so much. You have yourselves a wonderful day, and happy wargaming.